Yeah, so I learned about the Writer in Residency program and the application for the process as a student at Howard University, but also as a lecturer at Howard University. I thought of this as a multidisciplinary project. Early in life, my training as from a kid, drawing, colors, with paint, with sitting with my mom and aunties who sewed, stitching, and I wanted to do something different. I wanted to experiment, and residencies are an opportunity that you can kind of stretch your talents, if you will. You can finish a project or come to a new project or look at a way of trying something new. And for me, it was I had a prose poem, a short piece, about 700 words, that was published, called Blood on a Blackberry. And the piece had a lot of weight to it. There was more story there than 700 words. And I wanted to expand it. But it was also a story that, while it's not biographical to me, but the landscape is. It's a landscape that I know. A landscape that is rural, it feels quiet, it feels isolated. And I remember being a kid just trying to ride a bike on some of those country roads, riding with my cousins, and always feeling like not comfortable. There were pebbles, the ground felt like it was always moving beneath me. And so I wanted to bring in some of the imagery that I recalled from childhood and from those places. Place in the Black literary imagination is part of the research that I do, part of the writing that I do. And so I wanted to see it another way. So I had an idea of cutting my prose into panels of paper. And with that, using techniques that come out of traditions that I've learned from, the women in my family. My sister-in-law is a doll maker, and so she's always stitching these very tiny details that I'm fascinated by. And I wanted to play with some of that. So I was looking at another way of storytelling. And with that, I experimented with many different types of paper until I settled on using mulberry papers. And just as I would need to cut into these panels, I also needed to cut the text that I was working with. So taking pieces that had a kind of a moment of heat and then cutting them into the page. And then what were the images to help me bring this to life in a greater way to an audience? So those were the ideas that I started out or thinking through as I was preparing to respond to the questions for the application. This panel's called Can't See the Road Ahead. And it kind of begins with this little girl in this sweet little innocent little girl dress. A little lace collar, buttons, pleated skirt. But in this moment, she's sitting on history. She's sitting on a history that comes out of forced labor on plantations, and that's what the cotton represents. She's sitting on a history, and here's a book here. Its pages are empty except for this little delicate pieces of lace on each page. This is a history that doesn't include her, but she is a witness. She can look back, and in the faces in the work, their gaze is someplace that we can't see. But I, as a writer, I want to follow their gaze. Here, she's looking ahead, and it's a road. And the road, kind of like that road I rode a bicycle on. Along the sides of the road, there are all these things that kind of get in the way. And she can't really see what's ahead, but she's listening. She's listening to what may be coming around the road. And as we move forward to sit side me, little girl in a similar dress and sit beside me, kind of over her head. That's the voice of grandmother. Sit beside me and let me tell you what it's like. Sit beside me, let me tell you how to survive. Sit beside me, let me tell you where the danger is. But sit beside me and let me tell you I love you. Here is behind her gaze. And again, I'm inspired by thinking about those old photographs that we've seen in archives. You'll see these women, men, children, and they're in places where they're being photographed. And you don't know what's the occasion for the photograph. Some of those photographs, was it their choice to be photographed? Did they have any thought to what would happen to their photographs after that moment? What's behind their gaze? Here in this panel, this girl, and again I'm using antique laces, more layers of mulberry paper, because I wanted to create a portrait of that complex history. But what I have her holding here, which kind of speaks to what we saw and can't see the road ahead, is she's holding a book. She has literacy, but she also has power in that language to write her story, to see her story, because out there in this torn area is a history that doesn't include her. So these last three panels represent for me really a very emotional moment that came through research. And again, I was at the Underground Railroad Freedom Center in doing research, but there were, I guess, docents who were helping people to research their family histories using the records there. And so I spent several hours there just kind of searching. And I started with my mother's line. And I think I used my mother's line because my mother's voice is very much in my ear right now. And I hear her and I so want to remember, because I know my father's hands, but I don't know his voice anymore. So I want to remember her voice. So anyway, I was following her line because she's in my ear, and I can think through like us talking about things, and I can still ask her questions, and she may or may not answer them, but I can get information from her. So I found, as I searched through my mother's father's line, I kind of hit an ending point, and it was a woman named Fanny. And Fanny was born, as I look at these census reports from 1870, 1880, and 1900, I got bits and pieces of this woman, Fanny, and I could see that she was a foremother of mine. And she was born, in one document it says 1840, around 1840. In that information, I also find that in 1862, she had a son. Shortly after that, she had a daughter as well. In one reference, in one census, she's noted as mulatto. In another, she's noted as black. And her son is mulatto. So that places for me Fanny living through the experience of enslavement, born in 1840. She has a child during the Civil War. Fanny is in Virginia, so she's in the place where Confederates, soldiers, and the Confederacy, found for their capital. Here, it's like Fanny's kind of layering the generations. So we've got this antique handmade lace. We've got these kind of old-fashioned patterns using quilting materials. So, you know, Fanny on top of this kind of suggestion, if you will, these little ripples, this riff of, you know, the children that are to come ahead. And here in this piece, 1870 census, as I call it, and the piece beside it, which is 1880 census, gazing into what for me is a history that I don't know, that I'll continue to write into because I want to honor her that way. I'm in love with the work that I created here. And I'm in love with the idea of continuing to cut into this mulberry paper. I have fallen absolutely in love with mulberry paper. I want to learn how to make paper myself now. I imagine I need bigger space than what I'm used to working in to do that, but I'm not sure that's a lesson that I want to learn.